Okay, welcome to the next episode of the Working Wellbeings podcast. I am joined today by Louise Blanchett. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Yes, I really appreciate the invite.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I nearly called you Kate then. Because of our conversation
I
literally
have
just
that a
before we
lot.
hit record.
Yeah. When
That would
people
have been
put me on
awful.
hold, I get that. Yeah, Kate Blanchett, I'm like, I wish I was.
That would have been awful. I'll tell you what's worse than that, then bringing it up even though I didn't say it. Anyway, we'll forget that. We'll forget that stuff.
It's all good.
So lovely to have you on the podcast today. You've got an amazingly exciting role. So what's your current role? So is it health, safety and wellbeing?
No, it's purely well-being at Mott MacDonald, which is a global engineering consultancy, and I look after Europe, so about 8,500 people.
Small job then.
Small job.
Keeps you busy. So I tell you what. On the podcast, we often speak to people who are doing this wellbeing leadership job in lofty positions like yourselves. And one of the things that we're always really interested to hear is how you got there. So I'd love to start with your life story if you're up for it. So you can
Life
start as far back
story.
as you like. You can start as far back as you like.
Amazing.
But when did so what is your background? What did you do in terms of training, and
Yeah.
what steps did you take to get into the world of wellbeing?
Yes, it's been an interesting journey. So I actually started with psychology. I think I've always been fascinated with people and honestly wanting the best for people. So I did psychology with the view of helping people, but I didn't go down that clinical route.
Did you think about it?
Yeah, it was like another 4 years studying those. I
Do you
think
know
that
what?
put me off.
Do you know what, Louise? I'm a psychologist as well. That's my
Yeah,
background, and I did Oc Psych because I was too lazy to do clinical psych. Not too
not
lazy, but
laziness,
because
not lazy.
yeah, it's
Mm,
a lot of work, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
yeah, a lot of study.
yeah. And I think for me, I always envisioned I'd be in the corporate world. I have no idea. Neither of my parents were. They're both really more in academia. So I don't know where I got that from, but I've envisioned wanting to help on a macro level in the corporate world. So yeah, so after my psychology degree in Plymouth, I actually, before that, before decided to do my master's, I said I wanted to be a life coach. So I think, but one of the lecturers had a quite, yeah, not a very positive view on that. She almost laughed at me. But actually, I think it's a very up and coming career prospect these days. And I think off the back of that, I wanted to make the most robust decision, which was then to do the masters, which was fantastic. And then yeah, so that was a year the University of Surrey, which sadly no longer do that masters. And then following that, I ended up designing training for the military.
Okay,
So nothing, well,
training.
phase two training. So it was around how we'd convert, it was like blended learning solutions. So thinking about how you convert classroom-based learning into e-learning and how we could rationalize and basically streamline the current programs. So yeah, taking like engineering programs and streamlining them down and making sure they could still get accredited. So making sure the relevant parts were still included in the training, but using job analysis to make sure that only the essentials were in there and not all this additional classroom based content that was irrelevant was being used. So really random, but I was promised this 30-year career there, and then the government pulled the plug on the contracts. Yeah, so that was a sudden career change needed after that, and actually spent the rest of the next almost 10 years in talent management.
Okay,
So really random. But how I guess my step into wellbeing was I volunteered to be a wellbeing champion. This is going back, my goodness, 8 or 9 years now. And I knew at that time, I was like, this is exactly where I see myself. It was just like this light bulb moment.
was there any specific part about it, or was it just the role in general?
I was just so passionate about people feeling their best, whatever that looked like for them in their physical health, in their mental health, and helping people that maybe weren't sure how to get to a place of feeling better, whatever that initiative might be, if that was increasing exercise or eating better. I think just so passionate about people feeling the best version of themselves. And so with that, I would like do this champion role in my evenings or my weekends. I just loved it. And someone said, oh, I think that she's not fulfilled in her current role. She's doing that, which led to a promotion, but still in the talent management space,
Okay.
which is interesting. And then, so my career kept progressing in talent management. Yeah, I think I still went a couple more promotions beyond where I was at. And then the pandemic hit. So I was in quite a strategic role at Lloyds Banking Group in a selection assessment role. But then with the pandemic, that then really pushed the wellbeing agenda, which then was my opportunity to look at roles that were more strategic, but also wellbeing. And an opportunity came up. And that's a comment that's really led me to, well, the champions role has led me to where I am today and my masters for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's quite inspirational because we meet quite a lot of wellbeing champions through the work that we do. People who would love to, transition into more of a strategic wellbeing role, but don't see the route to be able to do that. But you're proof that that's possible, right?
I think it was a combination of the wellbeing champion experience, my masters, and the fact my role in assessment selection had become more strategic. So I was running projects, I owned that assessment selection strategy. So when it was converting over to wellbeing, a lot of that was really transferable. So yeah, so I think that those three things combined to put me in a really strong position. Yeah, so I was really lucky.
That's interesting. So one of the things that I've asked previous guests about is whether you think there's like a set of attributes or skills that are required to be successful in a wellbeing leadership role. You mentioned kind of a couple there, right? So strategic thinking, I guess, and taking that sort of approach. You mentioned the Oxite background as well. So what sort of skills do you feel that gave you?
Yeah, so I think where I've seen the most value as a Oxide is bringing rigor and evidence base to the workplace and to your decision making. So the strategy that I write for the wellbeing strategy for Europe is all based in evidence. It's all based in our people data. It's not, therefore you're going to have the greatest impact. So I think that data analytics piece is really, really beneficial in most roles now, I guess. But yeah, definitely in the wellbeing space, to making sure you're making really informed and evidence-based, data-driven decisions. I think having that scientific basis was really helpful as well. And yeah, I think that they were probably the main benefits.
Yeah, plus a passion for wellbeing, right?
That helps. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting though because that always comes up. That always comes up. And actually, do you know, we had a really interesting conversation recently. We were at an event and we ran a podcast in a little booth there, and it was what's the lady's name? Claire Fernandez. So she was the head of occupational health at BBC, I think. She was talking about this passion that brings people towards that role and how it might be a double-edged sword. She was saying that obviously it's really great because you're interested in and passionate and you like the role. Also saying that a lot of people who'd come into that role have kind of lived experience of troubles with their own mental health and whatnot, which is brilliant in terms of being able to understand the people that you're serving. But also she was questioning, she wasn't saying she had all the answers, but she's saying, does that skew the type of the population that we get within these roles in a way that is or isn't helpful? Again, just a question around that.
Yeah, potentially. I guess what I would say though is if someone has had their challenges and they've done the work, then you are probably more resourced than anyone to be also in this role. You hear some of the worst case scenarios, and I think unless you are equipped to absorb some of that, then you may find it really difficult to empathize and have compassion. It could be hard to connect, but also ultimately you want to empower people to support themselves. So that's how I view my role is how do I'm not there to fix or resolve things for people, but I'm there to resource and empower and educate and support people in other ways. So yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I think there could definitely be vulnerabilities with it. But hopefully, it comes back to self-awareness, I think.
I tend to agree. I tend to agree that I'd rather deal with the challenges of, have the lived experience and the passion and all the rest of it as a starting point, and then deal with the challenges that might bring, rather than the other way around, you see, where someone's completely lacking that empathy and perspective of the people that they're actually looking after and working with.
Yeah, I think you just need to think about if there's a topic that is going to really affect you and you're likely to be triggered, which, to be honest, I don't think there's many people that haven't got some form of trauma or something challenging that they've been through, if that's a loss or whatever it might be as a life circumstance. So it's then just thinking about what's your risk-based plan around that? How do you best support yourself if that's going to be potentially triggering or really difficult and could potentially make you unwell? What provisions do you put in place to support yourself? Yeah.
That's really good advice.
Yeah. There's been some, yeah. I was going to say there's been some topics that I've had to signpost forward because I haven't been in the position to be able to support. And I think that, again, I think this always comes back to self-awareness, recognizing this is a triggering topic for me, and I need to. The thing is, if you work in a large organization, it's much easier to do that where there's other people to signpost to. But I think it's having those boundaries in place and also provisions to support the other colleague. And that's something I'm really mindful of. I would never want people to feel that I've turned them away, but I have shared in the past, this is unfortunately something I can't support you with based on my own lived experience, and I will help you find the right support network moving forward. So
yeah, no, that's an interesting one. We did some work a few years back with content moderators at a large social media firm that I won't name, but real difficult job, right? And
Harry,
the thing that really struck me and kind of stood out was, yes, those triggers can be quite individual, and sometimes it's difficult to know what they'll be until you experience them. Like I've got two young children, and I think I'm all right. Like I'm not, not much around that triggers me, but then I'll see a film that's got something happening to children, and I'm in floods of tears. Like something,
yeah,
it just changes you, right? So it's
you might not know what that trigger might be, and I guess it's also having provisions for that as well, isn't it? I mean, there's some you may be really clear on. Yeah, that's definitely based on my past. I need to put provisions in place, but sometimes until you're in the situation, you just don't know.
Absolutely. So you mentioned, because we've not even got onto you were still at Lloyd's. We've not even got onto your current role yet. We'll get onto that. But I did want to just pull a thread a little bit around data, because I love data as well. So you mentioned the kind of data analytics and evidence-based being really important. I did a little bit of snooping on you before we did the podcast, and I spotted that kind of theme coming from your LinkedIn posts as well. So is that
Definitely.
something that you spend a lot of time doing, kind of looking at those metrics? And
Yes.
yeah, could you tell us a little bit
Something
more
that
about
still
that?
needs improving. Again, being in a large organization, we are fortunate enough to have a vast and significant amount of data. It's just then making sure that we have the expertise to analyze that and get the right insights from that. So, and also the data sets are quite vast in regards to how many people are perhaps using a provision versus where you can get a data set of the majority of your workforce. So yeah, then they have different weightings in regards to how many people are part of that picture. So yeah, and I think for me it's then triangulating all of that and bringing it all together and trying to understand what the story is. But we definitely have room for improvement in that space in regards to the frequency of looking at that data. We need to automate some of it because it takes my team and I, quite a while every quarter. Yeah, so we're on a journey. But everything we have done in the strategy and when we plan our campaigns and everything else, it is absolutely all data driven.
So you mentioned quarterly. So is that how you do it? So you report quarterly on different metrics
Yes,
related to
it was
well-being?
monthly, but then we
Oh, okay.
realised it's so manual at the moment, which I'll definitely fess up to. We're not totally there. I think we are ahead in regards to how comprehensive our data set is, but we're probably behind in regards to the sophistication of our analytics. So now it's on a quarterly basis, which actually fits in with some global reporting. So that totally made sense to drop the cadence down. But yeah, that every quarter that's then shared with the HR director. There's also global reporting, so that goes up the chain, and also to our wellbeing leads, which is our wellbeing leads, our HR or safety in each of our business units. So there's 6 business units in Europe. So it's shared with them to help them also have visibility of our people needs.
Yeah. And then they've got some autonomy in terms of how they use that information to see provision in their different parts of the world. I love that. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's kind
yeah,
of
they
like
do.
thinking globally but acting locally, right?
Absolutely. So I've just finished the 2025 wellbeing strategy, and that then has been cascaded down to the wellbeing leads, and then they will take that and also look at their bespoke data for their business unit and create their localized bespoke plan with their own KPIs. So yes,
Yeah. Got
it
it.
all aligns back.
And then
Yeah.
do you have kind of board level KPIs or is it?
Yes, yes, but the regions are quite varied, so they're quite broad KPIs globally, and then again we localize them at the region and then localize them at the business unit, and some even go down to divisional level. But yeah, that's another story.
Yeah, so it's a really good point about that, especially for larger organizations, because the challenges are so different, right? Psychosocial risk, and for those geeks like us that understand that term, all of the potential pressures or risks that could be associated with a job, they could be so broad. We think about the general ones like too much to do, demands and lack of control and poor relationships, but I was working with a multinational firm recently, and I was working with a team that they had in Colombia, and I was asking them, what are your psychosocial risks? And they were saying, well, there's a kidnap risk going to my car outside, to
Um,
in the staff car park, and we've got security to stop it, but it's a risk, right? And that is something that, touch wood, you talk to a team in the UK, it's not even entering your consciousness, is it really?
no, no, it's accounted for those cultural differences. Well, if you like the ISO 45003 standard, we have actually created a project level risk-based assessment based on that standard. So that's something that's just gone live in an app here, and that's another way that is going to be absolutely fundamental to our data collection, thinking about how many projects have completed that and what are our risks patterns over all the projects. So
That
that's
sounds
another way of
interesting.
localizing it even further. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a really, really awesome.
Can you tell me a bit more about it? So you say it's
Yeah,
project level. So you're kicking off a project, and what do you get them
yeah,
to assess against the framework, or?
absolutely. Yeah. So Mott MacDonald, where we're a consultancy, a lot of our work is project, sometimes even program based. So we're talking HS2, we're talking major infrastructure projects, new hospital programs, you name it. And so, based on that standard going live, we had someone fabulous create a project level risk assessment based on those 13 risks from the standard. We've taken that one step further and converted that into an app now, which is just about to go live. So, ideally, this would be done preventatively and proactively at the beginning of a project that's identified as a higher risk health, safety, wellbeing risk project. And we from that risk assessment would identify where our greatest risks are so that we can then put in control measures and mitigative actions to support those colleagues on that project. So some of that will also support wider supply chain, so where we're part of joint ventures, and even where we're working really closely with clients. So I think that's quite a revolutionary initiative that's just about to go live, and we're hoping it's not going to go live from people using it when the problem already has started, when there's greater pressures and people going off, etc. So yeah, we want to really push that up the work stream at the beginning of the project.
That I love that. Yeah, no, quite a few companies that do a kind of project-based work, right? And there's different
Yes.
challenges. There's different challenges that poses. There was one a couple of weeks ago. I was working with an energy firm, and they were talking about they do offshore oil drilling. So they're on these oil rigs, and just again, you're talking about psychosocial risk, and I'm talking about like how many emails are you getting? They're
Yes.
talking about completely different types of risk, both physical but
Isolation.
also
Yes.
mental. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's so full on, those sorts of things that they're working on. So
Really great
having
pressures.
something that's more tailored to what they need. Because if they get a well-being strategy that says, like get yourself a chair that feels good on your back. I'm not.
Blossom.
That's what
Yeah,
wellbeing strategies are all about. But you know what I mean. They'll read that and they'll be like, "This just isn't my experience of work." Whereas
exactly.
if you're co-creating that with them and you're assessing the risks and they're empowered to be able to put some of their own control measures in place, it's so much more relevant for them.
Yeah, that's it. So some of the control measures auto-populate, but that's totally editable. So we wanted to create something where there's not just a total blank canvas, because not everyone's totally au fait with putting in control measures. So they auto-populate, but yeah, that can be bespoke then. And you're right, what we then see is vast differences in regards to where the highest risks are and what those control measures are. So yeah, I think we talk about being preventative, proactive. I think this is really going to get to the root cause of some of those issues. So we're really pleased.
It's this space, right? Well, I'd love to have
Space.
you back on in a year when you've won a load of awards and yeah, how
Yes.
successful it is. Yeah.
When we've got the data.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So you said you were at Lloyd's, and then when did you move to Mott MacDonald?
Yes, so the Lloyd's was a secondment, which actually was unfortunately cut short, but that actually then led me to looking externally and led me to Mott MacDonald, which has been probably the best thing for my entire career. It's been fantastic. So I've been here 3.5 years, looking after Europe. Yeah, it's been busy, it's been challenging, it's been really good. And in some ways, it was kind of starting from there was a strategy in place, but really building and evolving that, which has been really enjoyable. I've loved the project work. I've loved kind of going on a transformational journey and taking the business with us. So, yeah, there's been some improvements with the strategy and what we've now providing our colleagues. So that's been a combination, not just myself, but also the benefits team. So for example, everyone now has private medical insurance, a cash plan, and I think the combination of various roles interplaying into wellbeing has been quite transformational for our colleagues. So that's great. I think it's just getting to those root cause issues now, like things like workload, and we're a consultancy. It's looking at things like there's utilization figures and then also other work demands that come to our colleagues. So how do we get that balance right? So yeah.
That's interesting. I'm fascinated by utilization fees and whether is that included in your data bank yet?
So our three key kind of themes coming through is around workload, work pressure, work stress. So I have actually been leading on a root cause project of what leads to those three things coming through. So I've actually done focus groups of over 50 execs collectively in the business unit. So we've now got 11 key themes that came off the back of the root causes for those risks. And we're now action planning at business unit level against those 11 key themes. So again, really trying to get to the root cause of our wellbeing issues.
Yeah, no, I'm hoping that's where. Well, I wanted to ask you about the future of these roles and whatnot, but I'm hoping that's where it goes, where it's a lot more data driven. The work that people are doing in this space, which it seems to be, a lot of organisations, a lot of individuals that I speak to on this podcast, for example, are trying to take a similar approach. Sounds like you're quite advanced with like you say, the amount of data that you got. So, yeah, how do you utilise that? How do you utilise that to
Yeah.
stay
Yeah.
proactive? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. I think it is understanding the root causes. So I think what's nice with doing those focus groups is it then provided lots of qualitative data against a very quantitative data set. We then used that qualitative data set. I did thematic analysis, identified 11 key themes, and then we did a risk assessment against it. So it then converted it back to quantitative. But then really visually, you can see where the greatest risks are and what's causing our greatest wellbeing risks and our root cause issues. So yeah, and I guess then it's all totally bespoke. And really that's where you should have the greatest impact, is making sure it's all root cause and all data driven. So yeah, but these are long journeys. There's not loads of quick wins, I feel, in the well-being space. I think, yeah, it's a lot of it's around policy and strategy, and some of that can take some time. So we're not immediately seeing really fast results. So I find that the most difficult part of my role, to be honest, because I'm quite impatient. So
Quite impatient.
impatient, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a balance, isn't it? Because with that impatience becomes motivation and passion, and you want to keep things momentum, right? You want to keep things moving, but Yeah, you're not the first person to say to us that, you need to be patient in this role, that, especially in a strategic role like yourself, you come up with something and you're like, oh, the business is going to love this. And 6 months later, there's still people on the front line who don't know who you are. And you're like, come on, I wish
Yeah,
this had been
definitely.
communicated. So there's a communication piece there, right? Which is really, really important, I guess.
Absolutely. And actually, I did intentionally employ someone with 20 years PR and comms background in my
Wow.
team. So we've got a wellbeing coordinator that looks after our campaigns. Yeah, anything comms related, she does a fantastic role. Really, I guess where I've seen a lot of, value in her role and bringing her expertise is people much more aware of our benefits offering and what is available to our colleagues, because she's finding ways to reach people. So that's been really successful. For example, we've seen our EAP usage go up from 2% to 10%. So it means we're getting the most out of our products as well, which is fantastic. And people know where to go for help.
Yeah. I really like that you've said that, because you'll have perhaps seen what I've seen in terms of this backlash against benefits, and because only in the sense that, people are saying, well, benefits aren't the way to go because they're a sticking plaster solution to something that needs to be done in a more root cause way, da 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 da. And I get all that, and I completely agree with that. And you've just talked about that. I completely agree with that. But it doesn't mean that some of those benefits aren't really useful for people. I was snooping. You're a yoga teacher, right? And
I am.
I love a bit of yoga. Why not? I don't think we should kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater, if you like. Just because we want to take a more strategic, proactive approach doesn't mean that we shouldn't therefore offer any more reactive benefits type wellbeing solutions for people. A lot of it comes down to actually just giving them the time and the space to actually use them. That's probably, and know about them as well, which is where the comms comes in.
Absolutely. Do you know, I hear a lot of debate around like yoga and yogurt. I totally get it if you're not doing anything else to address the root cause issues. I think there is a risk to only having those provisions and not some of the cultural work, the policy work, etc. Huge risk, because it can feel undermined by, if it's not backed up by the culture, you're in. However, I think if you are addressing both, which is exactly what we're trying to do at Mott MacDonald, so we're looking at what is the organisation's responsibility, what's the individual's responsibility, and making sure that our initiatives kind of cover both of those remits, then you can kind of have it all, ideally. So I'm still pushing some of those individual solutions, but we are absolutely at the organisational level looking at what we're offering as well, what we're doing and our responsibility.
It wasn't it? It was that paper from the Oxford Wellbeing Centre that said individual level solutions don't work, and I was like, okay, okay,
Maybe in isolation, maybe that's
on their own,
yeah. The rest of the conversation's missing there, isn't it? The sentence to say in isolation, sure, I'm sure they don't.
Yeah, and I tell you what really negatively affects people's well-being: taking something away. So getting rid of the benefits might have more damaging effect. I always smile. I worked with I could probably name him now. It was a number of years ago. William Grant. They make whiskey up in Scotland, and I know that at the time they were trying to, because it was costing the business so much, they were trying to reduce the amount of free whiskey that they gave people at Christmas, because it wasn't making business sense. Now look, we're talking 10 years ago, so they might have completely reversed their policy on this and all the rest of it, but at the time it was a real storm. It was like, don't take this benefit away. And it's one thing kind of giving people these benefits and trying to get them used and all the rest of it, but taking them away, that's
I think that's the thing. You got to be so careful of what is introduced, because I think it then becomes almost assumed, doesn't it, that that's part of your permanent offerings. So I think we've had to be. I think we're really quite conscious of that here. Again, it's all got to be evidence-based in regards to where we're going to have the greatest impact, how many people we're supporting, or is it part of our people strategy? So, for example, supporting women through menopause and using particular apps for that. But you're right, I think there would be uproar if anything was taken away. So, we are quite conservative in how we roll things out as well.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So it sounds like a fascinating role that you do, and it sounds like you're doing lots of interesting stuff around data. So tell me. Well, no, I've got a couple of questions. I was going to ask you. I'll get onto that. Do you work quite closely with the health and safety team?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So I sit within the HR remit, but I would say, um, so it's interesting. Where I look after Europe, I'm within the HR remit, but ultimate responsibility globally is in the health, safety, and wellbeing remit. So we are absolutely interdependent and work really closely together. I would say, we talked on that risk project that is being rolled out using that standard. That was in collaboration with someone in health and safety. So I see them as part of the ecosystem, and I don't think really you can have one without the other. I think health brings that kind of policy, culture, change, influence, and then health and safety bring that kind of risk-based approach. So I think collectively you're much more powerful.
yeah, yeah. And the reason why I ask is because I'm seeing a real trend. I don't know whether you've spotted this, but in industries like engineering, like construction, like more, I guess, traditional industries that took health and safety more seriously than some of the others where it just wasn't as big an issue, right? It was more about ergonomics and whatnot. There weren't as many actual physical risks. But if you talk engineering, if you talk construction, these sorts of things, they already get it around, health and safety. They hold the handrail when they walk down the stairs. They take it
They
seriously, right?
do very
And
seriously.
yeah,
Yeah,
I've been told off for that several times for not holding the handrail.
yeah, yeah. But also heard some horror stories, so I definitely hold the handrail now.
Absolutely. So whether there's an opportunity for, especially in those industries, for well-being to kind of not tag on to that, but like build on the good work that's been done around health and safety and bring the same sort of rigor to well-being, which if we're being honest, can be seen as a bit soft and fluffy sometimes, which is a
Yeah,
shame, but is the
I
view of
guess
a
it's
lot of people.
quite unregulated, isn't it? And I think where we're seeing a rise in health and safety experts coming working in that wellbeing space is that risk-based approach. And I think that's absolutely where the world is shifting in the wellbeing space is, based on that standard, for example, the ISO 45003, it's very much taking that risk-based approach, data-driven approach. So yeah, but I would say you kind of need absolutely both cohorts of people to be collaborating together.
Yeah. So talk to me about the future of the role. 5 years, 10 years from now, where do you think well-being leadership will be? Do you think it'll be
I've only just
similar? Do
finished a
you think it'll have changed?
2025 plan.
What's that,
Yeah,
sorry?
I said I've only just finished a 2025
All
plan.
right.
No, where do I see it? I think it absolutely is in that analytics space. I think there's more data at our fingertips day by day. It may even be connecting to things like people's devices, laptops. I wonder if that's the next generation, which probably scares people, but actually I guess there's a lot of information that can be told by people's working habits based on their computer habits, etc. So definitely to do with data analytics. I think there's going to be a lot more around individualism. So I mean, wellbeing is so unique to each person. And I think the proposition and offering needs to recognize that so that people have a choice in how they best support themselves. And I think there needs to be a lot more support and upskilling for line managers in particular of how you support other people in this space. So I'd say definitely that individualism, definitely data. So
And the
yeah,
risk-based
probably
approach that you talked
the
about
risk-based
before.
approach. Yeah,
Yeah.
Australia they've legalized that standard, so that's probably going to happen in other countries moving
Yeah.
forward. They're
Well,
leading in that space.
yeah, it's an interesting one that because my understanding is that our standard is sort of legalized over here in the sense that the health and safety standard certainly is 45,001 is right. You cannot legally cause harm to people in the workplace, and this standard kind of bolts onto that. But I'd be interested to see if an organization got taken to court, and
Mm,
pressed on 45,003, and especially if they were trying to adhere to that standard. Yeah,
yeah,
I think you could see
yeah,
a case in the UK relatively soon. I don't know. Oh, of
yeah.
course, not Mott MacDonald, but you know what I mean.
Not definitely
I'm just
not.
talking generally.
Yeah, I think identifying what your risks are and your control measures, is a
Mm,
minimum legal requirement, and then you've got your kind of ethical and moral reasonings for what you do on top of that, and that's where you can take it one step further, and that's where you get I guess the competitive edge is if you're really pushing in that moral space as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I like the way, I like language you use there. You know, you shouldn't be ashamed of saying this gives us a competitive edge, because that'll be another thing that really
Mm.
creates creates
Yes,
more purchase in this world, won't it? With organizations saying that well-being is as important for us as performance, or the two go hand in hand.
100%. I think forward leading organizations are already thinking that way because ultimately you cannot distinguish between productivity and performance and your well-being. Like they're totally intertwined. So I think that's a really good point. And I think employee experience is another really hot HR topic where people are kind of talent attraction of attention piece. What are people looking for? That agile working piece is absolutely huge now. And I think organizations that aren't offering that are already behind if they can, and as part of their work-based culture and how they deliver work. But I think if you're a totally office-based organization, you're not offering that, then you're probably already a step behind. Yeah, so I think you raise a really good point. That's probably plays into that individualism though, doesn't it? I guess how do you make what work looks and feels like really appealing, but then how do you allow for individualism in that as well?
So can I run one more thing by you?
Of
So I was
course.
thinking about the future of wellbeing leadership. I have lots of these conversations, and someone said to me recently, and it really it kind of really got me thinking. They were saying that in 5 years, 10 years time, there will be no wellbeing leaders because we want to embed it into the way that everybody else works. Wellbeing shouldn't be the responsibility of a distinct function within HR or health and safety. It should be everybody's job. Now,
Hmm.
my take on that, I'd love to get your take on that. My take on that is I get that. I get that. But everybody uses a computer at work. Doesn't mean you don't have a head of IT. It doesn't mean that there's not somebody who is accountable and responsible for the overall strategic agenda across a business. So it really got me thinking, but I've fallen on. I completely disagree with that person. I think it will grow. I think it will grow, and I think there'll be. I think the other thing that was leading this person to say that was that one of the things that I've seen recently, and I don't know whether this is a trend or whether this is just anecdotal, but some quite high profile well-being leaders moving out of their roles, so kind of moving out of the industry and or losing their jobs, for example. But I just think that's the ebb and flow of how any you know role works, and that
Hmm.
actually longer term we're looking at a trajectory where well-being leadership is eventually a board level position, and it's taken as seriously as some of the other things that I mentioned. I don't know.
Well, I would say that ultimately comes down to what we legalize. So I
Hmm.
guess obviously in Australia, they're not getting rid of wellbeing anytime soon. They've just legalized that standard. So, if we're heading in that direction, then absolutely not. I guess it's why would they say it's different to health and safety? Because I guess you wouldn't be done with a health and safety manager. So it's an interesting view, and I totally understand it is everyone's business, it is everyone's agenda, and everyone should be managing their well-being. I still think, yeah, I think the shift would more be what does it morph into? Like, would it be well-being and productivity and performance, perhaps, or well-being and sustainability in regards to, or like business resilience? So I think maybe it's a morph with something else, but I can't. Yeah, you're right. I can't envision a world without it at the moment.
I'm glad you said that. I don't think so. No, no, no. Yeah, but I think we should be a bit more gutsy around that. Around defending our industry as well, because there's so much good work going on that wasn't happening 10, 15 years ago, and it's by no means, we've sorted it all and we've solved it all. By your own admission, there's some things you're working on. That's the whole point. But
Yeah, exactly.
it's the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do. We're still on a journey. It's not a governed area. That's the other part that I'd love to kind of for it to come forward, it to be, yeah, some more governance around what well-being is and what it means for organizations. I think I'd like that to be the next evolution.
So tell me a bit about that. So what do you mean by that?
What do I mean by that? I guess thinking about we've got standards, but they're not currently absolutely legalized. You're right around, not doing no harm, but I think this is an area that could be more regulated. I think it attracts a very vast range of people. And I think that that has its pros and cons, but that it would be good for some of that to be standardized.
Yeah.
You've got some people I've been around. I went to a conference and sat around a table. Not one of us had the same background. There was health and safety. There was a physician, so someone that was a GP. There was me of my psychology background, and that's amazing on the one hand, but it just shows that it's so broad that it probably needs some form of standardization.
Well, watch this space. Watch this space. One of the things we're working on at Working Well is to, have worked on and have created is a universal standard for that sort of thing. So yeah, I'd love to tell you a bit more about that. But that's probably for another conversation. I cannot believe that's been nearly 45 minutes already. It's flown
Quickly.
by. It's absolutely flown by. Fascinating. Thank you so much for having the conversation with me today.
Thank you.
There's so many kind of nuggets of information and really great thoughts in there for people, I'm sure. Final couple of questions. One is, you might not have an answer to this, but were there any questions that you were hoping I would ask you when we came on today?
Well, no, I wasn't sure what to expect, to be honest. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I'd love to maybe ask you one about what you see as the future of wellbeing.
What I see as the future?
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll all just completely disappear probably next year. No. No, the opposite. The opposite. Look, you've stolen my thunder there. So I absolutely think the standardization is something that can and probably needs to happen. And like I say, actively working on. I'm really biased, but we run a community. And I think that will be one of the ways to create that is by bringing together, that was my inspiration for doing it in the first place, that I spoke to loads of amazing wellbeing leaders from all sorts of different organizations who on their own were doing really great things. And it's like, so I was the evil consultant coming in trying to help them out and sell them stuff, right? And I was like, actually, you just need to speak to this person over there and this person over there. And if we could just connect you to one another, you don't need the consultant anymore. So I'm almost doing myself out of a job there. But I think, there will always be a space, hopefully, for some consultancy. But I think connecting those and creating a really thriving community between those different people in those different roles will be key. And I feel that wellbeing is uniquely positioned to do that because whilst there is a link to performance and competitive edge that we talked about before, I think organizations are more likely to be willing to share, the things that they're doing with other organizations because it's the right, it's because it's about people's health and it's the right thing to do. So they're not going to hold them like trade secrets, so you're not going to get a competitor who's suddenly cracked the way to stop people having mental health problems. And they're going to say, but we're not going to tell you. We're not going to tell you, So actually, building that community, setting those standards, and then I'm biased, but again, I'm a data geek. This is two occupational psychologists talking to each other. So yeah, exactly. I think more and more that we can bring data in, board level KPIs, all that sort of good stuff.
Yeah,
I wish there was something different I could say. I wish there was some other
magic
curveball I could throw in there, but I'm not sure. I think that'll be the way. And I think what the challenge will really be is as an industry is being resilient to some of the setbacks. So I think that the whole industry of wellbeing leadership will face, mini setbacks along the way where we have these moments where we're like, is this even got a future? But I think it's our collective ability to learn from that and overcome it that will make the industry even stronger.
Yeah, I think we have to keep challenging it, don't we? And I think you're right. We're already in a position where industries are sharing with one another, industries and within the same industries. I think we're already there. Even when you go to conferences, people are there absolutely sharing their best practice.
Absolutely. We'll see. Right, thanks for the question. No one ever asked me a question. Appreciate it. So, for one final question for you, but this is an easier one. Where can people find you if they want you to, if you want them to find you, that is?
Absolutely, yes. LinkedIn's probably the best approach. I'm not on top of my inbox all the time, but please do reach out on LinkedIn. It's probably the best way to reach me.
Perfect. Well, it's been a pleasure. Hope to do it again sometime. Lovely to meet you, and hopefully I'll get to meet you in person as well. That's the only setback to these online recordings, isn't it? But thank you so much for your time today, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you so much.